Good morning, colleagues. This is meeting number 144 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for Thursday, June 13th, 2019. We are here this morning in consideration of the budget request of the Office of the Auditor General for 2019-20. I would also say that we televised this morning. I believe we're televised this morning. So if you do have a phone, especially to the committee members and those in the audience, if you wouldn't mind just muting them, and there's less distraction that way. We're here, as I said, in consideration of the budget request of the Office of the Auditor General for 2019-20. And before we begin, this is a little different. I would like to take a minute to commend the committee for the congenial spirit demonstrated among all members of this committee. In particular, I would like to thank Deputy Chair Mr. David Christofferson of the NDP, Deputy Chair Alexandra Mendez from the Liberal Party, and Pat Kelly from the Conservative Party for their amiable negotiation in drafting an excellent letter, I felt, to the Minister of Finance, a letter that this committee wholeheartedly supported. All members of our committee recognize the crucial, important work of the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, and therefore unanimously recommends that the OAG be provided with $10.8 million that it requested in its 2019 budget proposal. Furthermore, we strongly recommended that the budget decisions relevant to the officers of Parliament, and most specifically the Office of the Auditor General, should revert to Parliament. To discuss the budgetary ask of the OAG, we have a number of guests with us here this morning, but before I introduce them, I'll just 1 minute for 2 sentences from Mr. Christofferson, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow from what you mentioned, I just wanted to give my thanks and appreciation. Colleagues will remember that in the beginning we were dealing with the previous government's audits, and we were doing great stuff, but it's a lot easier to do that when it's the former government. And I said to the government members at the time, the day is going to come when this is not going to be easy, and to do the right thing for public accounts, to be nonpartisan and only look at the issue of government spending and efficiencies and waste, etc. And it's going to be tough, because you're going to get a lot of pressure from your government to not give anyone a wedge. And what happens is, and you know it ahead of time, is that the issue of voting unanimously on something that's in any way critical or not supportive of the government then becomes weaponized in question period, and yet the parliamentarians know that. And the job here is difficult. It's one that's different than any other committee, and we have to be nonpartisan. And when we're partisan instead of nonpartisan, Canadians aren't getting the oversight that we are mandated to provide. So I want to give a special shout out and thanks and appreciation and respect for the government members who, in spite of the politics outside this room, grew to the full parliamentary responsibility of this committee and were fully prepared and did, weeks before an election, set aside their partisan membership and say, in the interest of Parliament and the work of the Auditor General and the work of this committee, I think this is the right thing to do, and we'll deal with the politics outside. And that's exactly what they did, and I have the greatest respect for them and the greatest admiration. And anyone who wants to use that as a clip in their or a boomph in their material, you're welcome to it, because the actions in particular of the government members on this issue of underfunding of the Auditor General rose to the occasion and deserve the respect of all of Parliament for doing the job that's expected of them, in spite of the fact that politically it was going to cause them a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Christofferson, and I think that's fair. I think all of us recognize that there's a certain there's a difference when you're in government, but I'd say the nonpartisanship of this committee is what makes and what gives it the power behind it. I mean, we are not driven by partisanship, and we've worked hard that. So I commend government and the opposition, both opposition parties. So to discuss the budgetary ask of the OAG and the effect of the lack of funding is having on its office, we welcome this morning from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Sylvain Ricard, Deputy Auditor General of Canada, Mr. Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, and Ms. Casey Thomas, Assistant Auditor General. And from the Department of Finance, Mr. Nicholas Leswick, Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic and Fiscal Policy Branch. My understanding is that the Deputy Minister is with the Minister in Vancouver today, and so we welcome you, Mr. Leswick. Without further ado, we'll turn the floor to our Interim Auditor General of Canada, Mr. Sylvain Ricard.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you for inviting us to discuss the Office of the Auditor General of Canada current funding situation. This discussion is necessary to ensure that our office is able to deliver on its mandate. With me today are Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, and Casey Thomas, Assistant Auditor General responsible for performance audits. I'm going to provide a recap of the office funding and the pressure that have developed. Then I will speak to some challenges presented by the current funding mechanism. The office has faced funding pressures in recent years. This has impacted our ability to deliver on our mandate, to keep up with the complexity of the audit environment, and to ensure that we have the people, support services, and system we need to fulfill our responsibilities. Our need for additional funding was first raised by former Auditor General Michael Ferguson in the Office 2016-17 reports on plan and priorities, quarterly financial reports since then, and more formally in July 2017 in correspondence with the Minister of Finance. At that time, we had not requested or received a budget increase in about 10 years. In 2011, the government undertook a broad budget reduction exercise. Though our office, as an independent agent of Parliament, was under no obligation to make any cuts, we were strongly encouraged by the Minister of Finance to endorse the reduction exercise. We voluntarily participated. Some audit mandates were stopped, and investments in technology and knowledge building were reduced or postponed. Through these measures, we were able to reduce our workforce by about 10% and our funding by 8%. As a result, we returned $6.7 million in 2014-15 from our Vote 1. Notre financement est resté pratiquement le même jusqu'au budget.
Up to budget 2018, our funding remained largely unchanged, except for receiving $3.2 million for yearly economic increases, consistent with the rest of government. It's important for you to know that we have been, and will continue to be, forced to use about $1.5 million every year from our Vote 1 to cover unfunded salary increases from 2014-15 and 2015-16, and also to cover additional measures that we have had to put in place as a result of the Phoenix pay system so that we could pay our employees. We managed within our allocated budget for a couple of years, but by 2017, our budget was no longer sufficient to allow us to keep up with the complexity of the audit environment, the size of our mandate, and our operating context. The former Auditor General then asked for a permanent increase of $21.5 million to our Vote 1 to be phased in over 2 years. $9 million starting in 2018-19 and $12.5 million starting in 2019-20. This increase was intended to allow us only to maintain the current number of audits that we did, not to increase them. Since that request, we have received additional unfunded mandates.
Dans le budget de 2018, nous avons
In budget 2018, we were allocated $8.3 million, which included $1.3 million for accommodations and contributions to employee benefit programs. This means that the permanent increase voted by parliamentarians and available for our operations was $7 million. This was a third of the total increase that we needed in order to fulfill our responsibilities. In July 2018, Mr. Ferguson wrote back to the Minister of Finance to request $10.8 million in additional funding, which represented $3.7 million less than his original request for $21.5. The Minister of Finance acknowledged the thorough analysis conducted by our office. In Budget 2019, we received no additional funding.
Beaucoup de nos audits sont requis
Many audits we conduct are required by legislation, including special examinations of Crown corporations, most financial audits, and some work conducted by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. We continue to receive additional mandates with no related funding or any discussion of the cost of this work for our office. There is also the fact that the government's program expenses have increased by almost $75 billion over a 5-year period ending in 2019-20, and they are expected to increase by some $40 billion over the coming 4 years. Because these increases are reflected in the government financial statements, they mean an increase in our mandated workload.
in parallel. The auditing environment has become increasingly complex. This is due to many factors, including the transformation of the government pay system, new infrastructure arrangements that include different public-private partnership arrangements, and additional complex transactions such as pension investments made by the public sector pension plans. Auditors must adjust to the increasing complexity of the audit environment, and they need access to and must continue to build their expertise in areas such as IT system control environments and data analytics. It's equally important to stay current with accounting and auditing standards and to have access to technical professional development. Without additional funding, we struggle to provide our staff with this expertise. In performance auditing, we have seen an erosion of our capacity to gather and maintain the knowledge and expertise of the complex government programs we audit. We must be able to assign staff to develop this knowledge before audits begin so that we have all the information we need to select the best audits and so that we are ready when it's time to start our audit work. Our inability to invest in new technologies or audit approaches that are necessary to prepare the office for the present and future remain a serious concern. For example, some of our IT system will no longer be supported starting in 2019-20. Our current level of funding, we are unable to replace them before 21-22 at the earliest. We also estimate that our IT security risk will not be reduced to an acceptable level until at least 2021. Industry experts have expressed the view that we are significantly behind them in the development and use of IT-enabled audit approaches. We do not have the funding to modernize approaches and train our staff to keep pace with the industry. Because most of our financial audits and other works is not discretionary, if our funding remain inadequate, we will be forced to readjust priorities to meet our statutory responsibilities, comply with government policies, and meet our own organizational requirements, such as replacing IT systems. This means that parliamentarians will receive fewer performance audit reports that they can use to hold government organizations to account for the result they deliver for Canadians. 10 years ago, we were completing about 27 performance audits every year. In 2019, we will complete 16 performance audits. Going forward, with our current level of funding, we expect to deliver 14 performance audits each year. This will include 3 audits for territorial legislators, 4 audits presented by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, and 7 audits from the Auditor General. Avant de terminer,
Before closing, I would like to turn to what Michael Ferguson, our former Auditor General, considered to be the larger issue underpinning our funding pressures, the process by which our office, like other agents of Parliament, receives its funding. The fact that government departments that we audit are involved in determining how much money is allocated to us is not consistent with our independence or our accountability only to Parliament. To give you an example, in the audits we released in early May, we reported on the activities of the Department of Finance and Treasury Board Secretariat, both of which are involved in supporting government decisions about our funding. That just does not make sense. We would note that in his November 2015 mandate letter, the Prime Minister tasked the leader of the government in the House of Commons with ensuring, and I quote, that agents of Parliament are properly funded and accountable only to Parliament, not the government of the day, in collaboration with the President of the Treasury Board. End quote. In a January 2019 letter addressed to the Clerk of the Privy Council Office, 6 agents of Parliament, including former Auditor General Michael Ferguson, stated their desire for an alternative funding mechanism independent of the executive arm of government. They further detailed the need for an automatic annual budget adjustment based on a factor directly linked or pertinent to the mandate and functions of each agent of Parliament. One option could be to link our budget to the government's total program expenditures. In July 2018, Mr. Ferguson wrote to the Minister of Finance to propose such a mechanism. The process required to release funds is challenging, not just for our office, but for government as a whole. For example, the $7 million increase to our Vote 1 in Budget 2018 was not received by our office until October, after a laborious process of application to the Treasury Board Secretariat. This delay prevented us from using all the funding because of the time required to hire staff and to put in place contracts.
Opportunity to present the recent history of our office budget and the challenges we face as a result. We would be pleased to answer any question that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ricard. We'll now move to Mr. Leswick. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I hope that I can be of some assistance in addressing questions with respect to the committee study of Vote 1 funding for the Office of the Auditor General. The Deputy Minister could not be here today due to a scheduling conflict, as you noted. I would begin by clarifying that while the Auditor General is an officer of Parliament, his office is part of the executive branch. It is listed in Schedule 1.1 of the Financial Administration Act and therefore falls within the definition of a department in that act, as do the offices of the Information and Privacy Commissioners, the Lobbying Commissioner, the Official Languages Commissioner, and the Director of Public Prosecutions. While all of these officers are functionally independent of government, their offices are treated as government departments. As such, they are governed by the same funding framework as other government departments and agencies. That framework requires that a funding request be submitted to the Minister of Finance, typically in the context of the annual budget process. Requests for new funding must be supported by a business case. Incoming funding requests and their supporting business cases are analyzed by the staff of the Department of Finance. Advice is then provided to the Minister of Finance based on the department's analysis, which in turn informs the decision. If a decision is taken to provide additional funding, the department or agency is appropriated approved funding through the estimates process and appropriation bills. The advice provided to the Minister of Finance on specific funding requests and the rationale for decisions taken are confidence of the Queen's Privy Council, which I have no authority to disclose and as I trust the committee will understand. However, I can shed some light on the analytical process undertaken by the Department of Finance. The department assesses funding requests from 2 main perspectives. First, from a vertical organizational perspective. Through this lens, the department examines the resource needs and business priorities of the organization, the detailed elements of the funding proposal and strength of the supporting business case, and benchmarks and other metrics to help understand and evaluate the proposal's merits. At the same time, the department considers the ability of the organization to reallocate and absorb cost pressures within its existing funding levels, and its ability to implement a significant increase in its resource base. Secondly, the department analyzes from a horizontal all-of-government perspective. From this perspective, the department assesses an organization's request against other competing priorities from across government. In this context, the request is competing for limited new resources against other social and economic priorities. In his initial request, the Auditor General requested a 31% increase in the operating base for his office, a significant increase from both perspectives outlined above. Recognizing the importance of the work of the OAG, Through Budget 2018, the office received a 16% increase in funding relative to the 2015-16 fiscal year. In July 2018, the Auditor General submitted another funding request in the context of Budget 2019. The committee has been provided with a copy of this request, which was supported by the same business case as the previous year's request. The government remains committed to working with the Office of the Auditor General to ensure that the office is able to continue to provide Parliament with objective information and sound advice with respect to the performance of government programs and activities. Also, under the Auditor General Act, the Auditor General has the ability to make a special report to the House of Commons in the event that the amounts provided for his office and the estimates submitted to Parliament are, in his opinion, inadequate for him to fulfill his responsibilities. Finally, I would note that previous parliamentary committee studies and pilots have been undertaken since 2005 to propose and test new processes for the budget determination mechanism for officers of Parliament, to ensure the independence of the officers of Parliament from the executive while providing the appropriate measure of accountability for their spending and performances. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Leswick, for this. And we will now move into our questions, and we'll go in the beginning to Mr. Arsenault. Monsieur Arsenault, vous avez 7 minutes.
Merci.
Mr. Arsenault, you have 7 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, dear friends. Also, thank you for your opening statements. Your introductory remarks were very interesting and useful. Mr. Ricard, I'm going to repeat what I already said when we saw you the last time, which was, I think, at a time when we were reviewing your report on national parks. We can't necessarily give you everything you need without justifying everything. We're discussing important matters of the budget, particularly your budget. The task of the Office of the Auditor General is one of the most important ones of our democracy, of our country. That of our committee is also important. We are accountable to our fellow citizens and to all Canadians. I note in your introductory remarks that since 2011, the government asked you to reduce your operations because your budget was being reduced. That's what I've understood. During the operational review in 2011, and I believe the committee had access to the letter that was submitted at the time by the Auditor General. Mr. Ricard, I've only got a few minutes here. In 2011, was your office asked, you weren't there, but in the time of Mr. Ferguson, the Auditor General's office was asked to reduce their budget and its operations. Is that what I've understood? That was before Mr. Ferguson, and we did reduce our budget by reducing our workload. That's what I'm worried about. You reduced workload. There were obviously studies that had to be eliminated. It's essentially financial audits, which over time had been added to our mandate. And I'll give you an example. At one point, the government wanted verified financial statements for every department. And finally, that didn't materialize. In parallel to that, we had started fulfilling certain mandates. Given that the government initiative had ceased, we suggested stopping that type of mandate. So the government at the time suggested that you stop certain audits in order to be able to meet your revised budget. We voluntarily adhered to the spirit of that exercise. Voluntarily, that's what I've understood. If I understand you correctly, $6.7 million was what you needed to remove from your budget at the time in 2011 until 2015. Was that annually? The amount of $6.7 million was annually. That 6.7 was no longer there. And I'm going from, it seems like I'm jumping from one subject to another, but I see a connection with the lack of financial resources granted to your office. All these problems of computers that are not up to date. From what I understand, based on your introductory remarks, was it predictable when those cuts of $6.7 million in 2011 were accepted? Was it predictable that this could happen? I suppose that eventually it could have happened, but over a relatively long horizon. When it comes to IT infrastructure, at the time it was relatively stable. We had just invested significantly in essential tools that we use for our audits and had a lengthy life cycle. Yes, eventually 2017, 2018, 2020, eventually the life cycle of the IT system was going to end. However, what happened here were other elements. Technology accelerated when it came to our clientele, particularly the entities where we go to do our work. And this reduced the length of time at which we would have to reinvest. At the time that we released the funds, everything was stable and we had a relatively long time horizon. With the acceleration of IT, it became an issue of recruitment and retention for our staff. As I mentioned in a previous hearing, when we're not a modernized organization, that leads to challenges to interest the new generation to work at our office. In a few words, can I be given to understand that in 2011, when the Auditor General's Office voluntarily accepted reducing its costs and reduce the financial resources it was granted, and to reduce the number of audits or to sacrifice some of them, at the time, it had not expected that in 4 or 5 years or 6 or 7 years that the IT systems would need to be updated. I wouldn't say that we hadn't predicted it. All technology eventually needs to be updated, so it was predictable, but we had a time horizon of many years. And so it didn't seem like we needed to keep those funds all those years and that we would ask for them when we needed them. Based on these voluntary cuts, did the Auditor General expect in 2011, after 4 or 5 years, the increase that would seem the most appropriate for the office would be 31% of the budget? Was that number predicted? I would say that no. That's not the amount that we would have expected to have to ask for based on a normal life cycle. What happened here, once again, was the fact that we had additional mandates, but these mandates were unfunded. The acceleration of IT needs, I referred to that in my opening statement. When we compare ourselves to the rest of the industry, the challenges are there. They quickly adapted to changing technology. They had the capacity to invest in their auditing methods. Yes, I understand the challenge. I understand what happened. How much time do I have? 10 seconds. Thank you very much. I hope I'll be able to come back to this. Thank you very much, Mr. Arsenault.
Mr. Davidson.
Good morning, and thank you for coming in such short notice. So my line of questioning is actually in regards to myself. When I asked a question in question period, I asked the president of the Treasury Board to account for the refusal to fully fund the Office of the Auditor General. And I asked that question May 31st. So I'd asked the Auditor General, the president of the Treasury Board responded, and I'll read her quote, "I cannot believe that the member opposite has asked that question," being me. When the government cut the OAG's budget by 10% and then never built it back, the Liberal government that budget back because they are committed to the ongoing work of the Auditor General. And that was the Liberal government saying that they're committed to your ongoing work. So does the Office of the Auditor General agree with this assessment of their current funding support and the voluntary budget reduction in 2011?
If I hear your question correctly, we have done on a voluntary basis an exercise back in 2011 that led us to reduce by $6.7 million our vote one. Along with that, so to be able to reduce that funding, we suggested that certain audit work was not needed anymore because it was accumulation of mandates that historically we had received.
Right, and that leads to you voluntary did that with other departments back then, and then that leads us, because we're trying to make this simple, to now, which has never happened before. We had concerning audits as far as cybersecurity and Arctic sovereignty that were canceled. Audits for this coming up year.
Yeah, we with the challenges we're facing, we cannot. We can't keep going 24, 25 audits a year. It will be reduced to 14 for
Right.
performance audit because a significant part of our business is mandatory work, like the financial audit, the special exams. We have no choice. Along with the fact that we were talking earlier about the IT aspect that accelerated the challenge because of the new technology that came forward, the cloud business and all of that. That's where the suppliers are going. It was not there in 2011. But on top of the IT angle, we do refer in the opening statement of all of that complexity that happened in the industry over the last few years, both from the accounting and the auditing side of the business. That wasn't there in 2011. We could not foresee that, right?
Right.
So we're now facing that. Colleagues and the rest of the industry and reinvest and all of that, adapt to that. We can't. We don't have the money unless we reduce the performance audit.
Do you have any idea? Because at the end of the day, you're the taxpayers, stopgap. We look to you to audit these things. Do you know why the government would not want to increase your budget? Because it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it's difficult for me to speak of the why. I mean, Mr. Ferguson, the former Auditor General, put forward his business case, a fully detailed business case.
Plan.
It's a detailed business case. I think it's 15-page long or something like that. All the detail is there. The breakdown is there. It speaks of the type of additional mandates we got. It's lists them. It got the breakdown in terms of cost of it. It gave the example of the type of complexities of the new investment, the type of investment pension plan have to put to invest in that are not just T-bills and you get the value of the day. It's
Right.
complicated financial instruments.
And like I said, it's important, especially now with global climate change and what's happening in the Arctic and with Russia and China. Arctic sovereignty is an audit that the taxpayers would want to see, and especially now with cybersecurity. And we're just back to, I'm trying to wrap my head around why the government wouldn't increase your budget so that taxpayers could actually have a look at those audits.
Again, I can't speak for
I'm dumbfounded
others.
about it too.
We filed
Frightening.
a convincing case. We filed a business case that is fully aligned and structured, and I was there. I was there when the Auditor General got a bunch of people in his wardroom many times, having a fulsome discussion, challenging us the same way he's challenging departments. It's a very, very rigorous exercise that was undertaken by him. So aside from that, speaking from our perspective, I can't explain why others, I guess, don't agree with it.
No, and that's what I can't figure out. I mean, we're all here challenging you again today, and I think the former Auditor General has always already been challenged, and like I said, these are concerning audits to Canadians. Your office is very important, and I'm still baffled why the government will not answer that question. It makes no sense to me. So I'll turn it back, Mr. Chair.
No, there's a minute and a half, Blake.
Sure.
Mr. Richards, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to take that time. Maybe what I'll do is we've got our officials from finance. I guess Mr. Leswick. Yeah. Just given what you've just heard, about the business case and everything else. I mean, is it possible to get the Office of the Auditor General their requested funding increase, and if not, what's preventing that increase from being granted?
Mr. Leswick.
Thank you for the question. I guess it's important for me to just kind of lead off and just say that, don't want to sound dogmatic in any one approach that, that we have it right and that, others have it wrong, because I think that's the wrong perspective. Likewise, from a bureaucratic perspective, we clearly recognize the importance of a strong audit function. In my job on a day-to-day basis, we work with the Office of the Auditor General in the performance of the financial audit against the government's financial statements, and we do that in partnership, and they're fantastic colleagues. So in the context of answering your question, I think it's important to recognize that the office was provided with a significant increase in resources. While in fact, they did come to the government and ask for an increase of over 30% in their operating base, some approximately 150 new employees. Through our process and through the budget process, the government did grant the office a 10% increase in resources, representing a 16% increase in their resource base over the last 4 years. Which does outpace government spending as a whole. So they weren't stonewalled. They didn't receive nothing. I understand there's a gap, and that gap is what's quite frankly being argued and debated, and I completely respect and understand that. Part of the job we do at the Department of Finance in providing our advice to the minister is quite frankly, we say no a lot more than we say yes, and that's not just picking on the Office of the Auditor General. It's kind of managing government finances as a whole. The requests and proposals far exceed the fiscal capacity to respond to those. And as I said in my opening remarks, we consider these business cases from a vertical perspective, going line by line, and appreciating the information that the Auditor General has provided in his business case. We challenge every line, and we consider it from a horizontal perspective against priorities and spending proposals from across government. So that's where we landed, and happy to answer additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Leswick. Thank you. We'll now move to Mr. Christofferson, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here. And I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Leswick. I don't know whether you drew the short straw or whether you did something wrong and somebody's punishing you, but they sure threw you to the wolves, potentially. And I just want to thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
In light of the fact of others who aren't, and there you are facing the fire. But also just your tone and your approach and your acknowledgement of at least the legitimacy of the issue here. I appreciate the way you're defending the job you did, and I just want to compliment you, because this could have went sideways real quick. And I think you've done an excellent job, and I want to personally commend you, and hope you continue to provide the kind of contribution you do. Chair, I think that the Auditor General has outlined the case as well as can be expected. What I'd like to do in my first round is just provide some context, and if they're reserve my right later to shore up any arguments if that should be necessary. But really, what I'd like to do is to put this in a context. Let's understand that in the world of democracies and particularly accountability, Canada is a world leader. A world leader. I mean, we fight for that in as many categories as we can. Given our size, we don't normally make like number 1 or 2 in too many things. We're usually in the top 6 or 10 on things that matter. But I got to tell you, in terms of auditing and our Auditor General process and the work of the Public Accounts Committee, it is world renowned, particularly this committee in this Parliament. It just stands out so much. And again, I compliment the government members on a much more difficult decision for them than us in opposition. And yet you rose to the occasion, and I can't praise you enough and respect you enough for doing that, because without that, we're nowhere. So thank you. Conversely, something like this jars the international community when they go, wait a minute, I'm hearing something about the Liberals, Trudeau in Canada is not giving the Auditor General the money they need? What's this all about? It'll have an effect, a negative one. And it breaks my heart, and this is like we're down to the last couple of meetings, and I leave here so proud of the work we've done, and yet there's this great big stain on the work of the Public Accounts Committee. Now, Mr. Leswick went out of his way to point out the processes involved, and again, I have great respect for what he said, and particularly how he said it. But understand, That's the problem. It shouldn't be looked at like every other department. Because right now, a part of the argument being put forward by the government is, well, we didn't treat the Auditor General any different than other departments. Red light, problem, flag on the field. They aren't other departments, regardless of how we've structured it. And keep in mind, this was recognized by the government, recognized personally by the Prime Minister, who gave a mandate to his House Leader to stop this way of funding it, because this is how you end up in crisis. Exactly this. And had the House Leader done her job and put that mechanism in place, we wouldn't be here. In fact, I would be complimenting the government on making a significant advancement in protecting the independence of Parliament's officers. Let's remember, these are not just any bureaucrats. They answer to Parliament. Parliament hires the Auditor General. Parliament fires the Auditor General, not the government. And yet it's the government process that decides funding. Now, to get into a little bit of the politics of this, I am very much like my friend Mr. Davidson, at a complete loss, and have been from the beginning, as to why the heck this is happening at all, given that it's never happened before. So I can only come up with 3 potential motivating reasons, and I haven't heard a single one from the government. And I don't mean the government members here, I mean the government in the House of Commons, because you've done your job, and now it's for us to put the pressure on the government through the House. That's how this works. So if the Auditor General had a process of an independent way of getting their funding, I wouldn't need to raise this. But we don't, even though they were supposed to do it. Number one, it was specifically to avoid cybersecurity. That the calculation politically is better to take the hit now for underfunding the Auditor General, especially when nobody in the media is paying any attention except Andrew Coyne and Post Media, and I give them full marks. I wish it was somebody else driving this than me, because for us, it often looks like we're trying to generate a headline. I'm trying to do the opposite, fade away and disappear. This is not the way I wanted things to be. But I got to tell you, I just wish the national media would pay a little more attention to this. With the greatest of respect, this bloody well matters. So anyway, was the political calculation to avoid the cybersecurity because it would be so devastating? Because I was here for the first cybersecurity and audit. And it was devastating, shook me to the core. So is that why they're underfunding, to make sure that that particular audit doesn't come forward, because they're arrogant enough to believe they're going to get reelected and they know the damage this might do to them in the second mandate? One possibility. Another, and with the greatest of respect, I don't mean you, sir, personally, Mr. Leswick, but is it retaliation and revenge on the part of the bureaucracy, who ended up having a rather negative audit? I mean, the Auditor General audited the very people who helped decide whether or not they get full funding or not. So was it revenge, retaliation? And I want to say, I find it hard to believe it's either one of those two, particularly given that I know the individual members of this government. I find that really hard to believe, but I'm at a loss. The last one seems to me to be the most likely, and it's also the one that we can fix the quickest. And it looks to me like there was a mistake, that this slipped through, and now they've doubled down because they don't want the embarrassment of having to change their mind. If anyone can offer me any motivation beyond that, I'm willing to listen, because I really can't think of any other reason why the government would do this except those 3 reasons. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Christofferson. Madam Mendez.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you for being here. Mr. Ricard, Mr. Hayes, Madame Thomas, and especially Mr. Leswick. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation at the last minute. I'm going to use a bit of my time as well to seize the opportunity to look into, to give the position of the members of the government. We all agree on the idea that we need an independent mechanism to review the funding of our officers of Parliament. We certainly support that idea. When it comes to the mandate of the leader of the government in the House, and I must thank her for having launched the process. It's a long process to change this way of proceeding with funding. She is working on it. This isn't something that happens as quickly as we might like. However, it's not because she didn't want to look into how things should proceed in the future. She also has constraints. There's legislation that we would have to pass in the House. Now, based on what Mr. Christopherson said, whom I respect enormously and appreciate as a member of the committee, in the arguments that he presented for the refusal to accept the OAG's request for funding, I would add a fourth reason, and I think it's the right one, based on what Mr. Leswick just presented, which has more to do with the total picture of the financial capacity of the government. That was the funding that was possible at the time. It was not a matter of vengeance or fear. It was simply a matter of financial capacity. Mr. Leswick, what would you have to say about that?
Thank you for the question. As I suggested in my opening remarks, I mean the request, the business case presented by the Office of the Auditor General was duly considered. It was due diligence was performed on each element of the business case. There, without providing too much specifics in terms of the advice that we provided to the Minister of Finance, but a view that the office was on a growth track, that it was growing, in and around 15% since the kind of, I would say, the trial of its funding in 2015, that it had been provided with a 10% increase in its resource base in budget 2018, and that it had some time to implement that increase, and that in a future period additional funding requirements would be considered at that time.
Additional funding over the 5 years that you've put.
No, sorry, excuse me, just to be specific, that there was an allocation approved in budget 2018, and that we would continue to work with the office going forward to consider risks and pressures that face the organization in the future.
Okay, so 18-19, that did not come into account when you studied the credits that were going to be given to the office?
Sorry, they were granted a 10% increase in their resource base in budget 2018.
Yes.
In 2019, we continued to engage with the office. They presented the same business case, as we've kind of heard the chronology of how they presented their funding proposal. They weren't granted additional funds in budget 2019. But it wasn't as though their business case was dismissed. It's just that they were on a growth track, and that we would continue to re-engage with the office in future budget periods to understand the elements of their pressures and resource needs going forward.
Monsieur Ricard, si j'ai bien compris, de vos...
Mr. Ricard, if I understood correctly, one of the challenges you faced was not only the issue of human resources, but it was also to uphold the contractual obligations you've had in place since 2014-15 regarding salary increases. I think it was in your notes, in your opening remarks. Yes, that had to do with the economic pressures of the last few years. And then your IT capacity, I believe you referred to that. Now, the IT issue is not new. For a few years now, you've realized that there was going to be a need to modernize and improve your IT capacity. Over the years, did you consider improving your IT capacity in order to proceed to the eventual changes you would need to make, or was it independent of each budget that you did this? Well, I would instead refer to the fact that when we returned the funds to the government in 2011, at that time, our IT platforms, our tools, all of that was stable. Since then, the entire industry, the ways providers do things, have changed, and the change was exponential. The cloud didn't even exist in 2011. We couldn't have predicted that. From the time that all of those things changed, from the time that we had to face new policies for automation and IT security, we had to adapt. These were all new elements that came up in the last few years. In the opening statement, I tried to highlight the fact that government expenditures are increasing, which amplifies the challenge that we are facing. The complexity of business models, of tools, of funding used by the entities that we are auditing, these are all things that happened since 2011 and completely changed the picture. In 2017, the Auditor General said, okay, here is the breaking point. We have to do something. Otherwise, we'll be forced to cut down on audits, namely management audits, because you would no longer have the tools, because we would have to invest in all that. We had to adapt. We can't not do our financial audits. These are audits that we have to do. It's legislated. We are required to do this. These are mandates with which we have no flexibility.
Just before we go back to the opposition, Mr. Leswick, in his comments, this is a question for Monsieur Ricard. Mr. Leswick, in his comments, talks about the Auditor General Act, that the Auditor General has the ability to make a special report to the House of Commons in the event that amounts provided for his office in the estimates submitted to Parliament are, in his opinion, inadequate. I guess part of my question is, will the OAG office consider that special report to Parliament? Has he done so in the past, and even in times past? And will he consider this at this time or in the future?
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll ask Mr. Hayes to answer that
Mr.
question.
Hayes, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the power to issue a special report is in the Auditor General Act. We have never used that. It's been there since 1977. We have never used that power. It is something that we considered in this context. However, I have to say, with the support of the committee and the hearings that we've had over the DPR and the DRR, and the DP, quite frankly, it's this kind of dialogue from the committee that we would have hoped for in response to a special report. So from my perspective, at this point, it wouldn't be necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. We'll now move to Mr. Richards, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess at the end of the day, what really matters, well, probably with almost any policy, but certainly when we're looking at something like this, is what's the impact that it has on taxpayers? What does it mean for the everyday Canadians? So you've laid out quite clearly, some of the challenges that you're facing, the fact that you're not able to perform some of the audits that you would wish that you could perform. Some of the challenges you're facing in terms of the inability to get new technologies, to train staff to today's levels. Maybe give us a sense as to what does that mean? What does that mean for everyday Canadians? What does that mean for taxpayers if you can't perform some of these audits? What is the impact going to be on taxpayers?
Okay, so first of all, if you don't mind, I'll use some of your time just to, before I forget, to thank this committee for the support that is being provided to the office over the years. So we're very, very thankful of that. Second thing, I want to be very clear. We will invest in training, in technology, in all of those challenge. We will do that. We have no choice. We can't do our audit work without doing it in respecting quality standards. What it means, and hopefully that's answering some of your question, it means that because of no choice there, we have to reduce the number of performance audits Those are the audit, like the one we submitted recently, call centers, protecting the RCMP officers, asylum claims. Those are the types of audits that we are reducing significantly. We have no choice. We will invest on those other things where we're facing the challenge. We have no choice, but we have to self-fund that. The only place where we can reduce is in performance audit.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess, given that and also given the fact that, we have a government that's expanded the size of government quite considerably and has, plans to continue to do that with some pretty major expansion of government. What is that going to mean in the future? I mean, what kind of impact will that have over the next few years in terms of, just being able to do the core functions of your job? You've already outlined, of course, the ability to be able to do some of these other audits. And what will that mean for taxpayers in the end? Like, I don't know if we got to that. Like, what's the impact on the everyday Canadian?
Well, we'd like to think. Okay, so first of all, and we've had the discussion before, our audit process for performance audit, very rigorous, risk-based. We're trying to select the audit that will have the most impact on people. I just referred a few minutes on a concrete example that we just did that we like to think, and we've heard from this committee and other sources, that they are very important audit, very useful audit, because they impact directly the Canadians. Those are, like, I'm repeating myself here, call centers. We need to bring that forward. We need to help the system to improve on things. So ultimately, those audits are directly linked to impact on Canadians. That's how we select those audits. We do our best to select audits that ultimately will have an impact on people.
So would you say that's at the heart of what your main concern is here? You're like the fact that it is going to have an impact on Canadians with the government, with the government increasing the size of government, and you not being able to perform some of those audits that you'd like to perform. You're saying there's going to be a direct impact on Canadians. Is that the heart and the core of the concerns that you have around this inability to get the increases that you need? Would that be a fair statement?
So, just to build on what Mr. Ricardo said, and to acknowledge that you're correct, government program spending has increased significantly over the last 5 years. In 2015, it was approximately $253 billion. In 2020, it's almost $329 billion. So for us to look at all of that extra money that's being spent, that is being spent using taxpayers' dollars, that matters. And when we have to make difficult choices on the types of audits that we select, we've explained that we had to drop audits on cybersecurity and protecting Canada's North. Those aren't easy decisions, because if we had chosen to drop other audits, there would be a part of our population in Canada that would be disappointed that we're not looking into those things too. I hope that answers the question.
You're 20 seconds over.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Whalen, please. Mr. Whalen, you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sorens.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Whalen.
Speaking of the work plan for 2019-2020, what are the performance audits then that you will do?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With respect to the audits that we're planning to...
Just the performance one.
Just the performance one. We only have one more audit planned for this year, which is Respect in the Workplace for 2019. For when we're looking at 2020, we have 3 audits that we're going to be doing next spring, which are supplying the Canadian Forces, immigration, detention, and removal, and student financial assistance. We're currently in the process of carrying out our work to determine what we'll be carrying out in the fall of 2020. The other product that we will be producing is in relation to an update on results measures. It's a new product that we're looking at to follow up on observations that we've made in the past. As opposed to doing complete follow-up work, we're doing more focused work, a way to be a little more efficient and effective because we don't have the funding to do full audits.
Great, thank
I
you
can
very
also
much.
talk about the commissioner's work if you like.
No, this is perfect. So, Mr. Leswick, with respect to that, Are there other departments or agencies within government that have the mandate to look at the results and measures that Ms. Thomas says that the Auditor General wants to have a project on instead of cybersecurity and instead of Arctic sovereignty that might be better positioned to do that work?
I'm kind of out of my depth on that one. I
Okay.
don't truly know if I could identify an organization that would do the work.
So within Treasury Board, is
but
there
I don't know if you're
someone-
asking the right guy, to be honest.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Maybe Mr. Christofferson is right, and maybe you were thrown to the wolves a little bit today. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's very interesting. So as the decision to be made between respecting the workplace audit, immigration audit, and student replenishment audit, why was the decision made to prioritize those over the things that the committee and parliamentarians have made very clear are our priorities, which would be cybersecurity and Arctic sovereignty? I think if the choice was up to parliamentarians, and perhaps it should be, I think we would reprioritize your work plan.
Well, let me say that the answer to that, and I'll ask Madam Thomas to add to this, is at the core of the discussion. It's a capacity issue. It's a funding issue. On this, I'll let her expand a little bit on that one or those two specific files.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We're an independent audit office that selects what we do, why we do it, and how we do it, and that's critical to our role. We identify our audits based on residual risk, impact on Canadians, the value we can add. We do not want to be in a situation where we are cancelling audits, but in the two that we're talking about...
That's interesting. So then you're then telegraphing, I guess, that you feel that the four that you mentioned would present a greater risk to Canadians than the two that you're canceling.
So with respect to, Mr. Chair, thank you.
So they're not in the top four audits that you think need to be done.
With respect to cybersecurity, for example, I can talk to you a little bit more about how we ended up where we're at. We have one team currently in the office who has the expertise to carry out that work. As you can imagine, that's work that is quite technical, and we need an in-depth knowledge of business there to be able to carry out that work. We only have one team right now able to do that. The team that would have carried out that work was the team that carried out our 2 Phoenix audits. So we had initially planned to do 1 audit on Phoenix. As a result of what we were finding in relation to the governance and other issues, we decided it was critically important to do a second audit on Phoenix. That second audit was tabled, and the team did not have the opportunity to gather the knowledge of business on the next audit, cybersecurity, which is still in their expertise, but they hadn't had the time to develop.
So you're saying that even if you had the money today, because the team isn't ready, you couldn't have delivered on cybersecurity anyway. It's really capacity within your organization over a long period of time that's preventing cybersecurity from being done because you don't have the team that's built up. So this is really a longer term problem, is my understanding of what's being said. And it doesn't really seem to be anything that's related to the current funding gap. This seems to be a problem that arises entirely because over the period of time, you did not have 2 technical teams for IT audits.
Hard on that.
One nuance there. Exactly, it's a capacity issue. We don't have the funding to be able to have a second team, have a bit of leeway. We've talked at this committee over the years about the importance for us to be able to respond to requests that could come from this committee in terms of being nimble, having a team to be able to quickly turn to another audit. We don't have that capacity.
So just so you know, your time is up. Yeah, I just want to very quickly come back to your point. The question I think Mr. Richards was asking earlier is the taxpayer side. As we've conducted our studies on the call centers, we find out that the taxpayers are very concerned about the fact of the what is viewed by some as poor service through our call centers. And so that obviously was one that we felt, even as a committee, was in the committee's interest that we wanted to study it. The second one that they chose to do was asylum seekers. Very timely. A very timely study. I commend the auditors for their choices in audits because I think that's where the taxpayers really are. The third one, data or call centers, asylum seekers, and RCMP security. Again, a very, very vital one given some of the attacks we've had where there's been deaths. So I thank the auditors. I think I speak for our committee, absolutely believe that you must remain independent where you decide what those audits are to be. And I think maybe from the perspective that we come from as a committee, you know, public safety, national security, I've served as chair of that committee. We also know right from that committee that cybersecurity, maybe it's not the conversation amongst the average taxpayer, but I think all committee members on all sides understand. I think even when you pick up a paper or any type of media, cybersecurity is an issue that we face today that we haven't thought about in the last, 20, 25, 30 years. But it is a massive concern. And so I don't want our committee to get too far off here. It's not one government or different government. This is the mechanism on how best to fund parliamentary officers or what Mr. Leswick calls departments, but even like the Office of the Auditor General. And this is what I think we need to consider a little more here. Where are we, Madam Clerk? We'll go back to Mr. Davidson, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm back to, this is an audit emergency. This government loves to use wording like that. And to me, we keep seeing all these words like in 1977, since you've had that to be able to go in front of the House. It's never been used. We're back to the Auditor General has never been underfunded. We've never canceled audits. This is all the flags are up here, and I'm still back to why the government has chose not to fund this. I'm just quickly trying to get a handle on the numbers I heard on this government spending increase. I would go to you, Mr. Leswick. $250 billion to $329 billion in programming spending. Was that the right number? I'm trying to work out the just as far as the Auditor General budget goes, I'm trying to work out the math on the massive increase in program spending. Is that 31%? Was that math right? 250 billion to 329 billion?
Mr. Leswick.
In programming,
not so sure about the base. I don't have my statement of transaction in front of me, but yes, in and around it's grown to 330-ish billion.
So from 250 billion to 329 billion in government spending.
I can confirm.
We just love to hear the exact percentage increase. And our Auditor General is looking for 10.8 million. So back to the chair's question and comments. The Liberal government House Leader mandate letter explicitly called for an independent funding model. This is the Liberal House Leader of the Auditor General. It was a promise of the Prime Minister in 2015, and it was in the letter. So my question is to the Auditor General: since the Prime Minister made a promise in 2015, another promise in November of 2015. Has the government House Leader or her office engaged with your office on how this independent funding model is going to look? They've had 4 years to engage your office on that. We should be close to.
I'm going to go to Mr. Ricard first, I think, on the former part of the question. Were you trying to signify?
I was just suggesting that,
Mr. Hayes.
Mr. Hayes? All right,
because after
Mr.
4
Hayes.
years, we should
and
be
on
close.
both questions then, Mr. Hayes.
So maybe I grabbed the second part of the question more than the first.
Yeah.
But so if I can deal with the funding mechanism, the Auditor General Michael Ferguson wrote to the Minister of Finance in 2018, setting out what he proposed to be an option for an independent funding mechanism. To my knowledge, that was the first time since 2015 that our office engaged on that issue with government. In January 2019, in one of the last letters that Mr. Ferguson signed, he co-signed it with 5 other agents of Parliament, asking the Clerk of the Privy Council office about independent funding mechanisms. And we've had preliminary discussions with our colleagues at the Privy Council office, but those discussions haven't progressed very far right now.
So after 4 years, we're not very far.
At this point in time, we don't have a proposal. We don't have a new funding mechanism. We are aware that the government is thinking about it, and we are ready to engage and seek a solution.
No, okay. It concerns me after, like, since 2015, we're still nowhere. Frightening again. Did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I can, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Écoutez, c'est très troublant de vous entendre.
Listen, it's very troubling to hear what you have to say this morning. Because for us, the Auditor General is all about credibility and confidence with the Canadian public. And what we see this morning is that the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau has interfered not only in your capacity to get the amount of money that you need to do your work, but in a certain sense is telling you, well, you can go look into this field and maybe not another. The chair just mentioned cybersecurity. As former Minister of Public Safety, that's an important aspect. We're on the eve of an election. We know that there's foreign interference, and we don't have the tools and the money necessary for you to be able to reassure the Canadian public on measures in place. It's very troubling. And maybe in my next point I'll come back to this, but my main point is going to focus on how to restore the independence of officers of Parliament relative to the executive. That's at the heart of Canadian democracy. And manifestly, the government's going down the wrong track, and I will raise this again in my next opportunity.
I know that he was, he wasn't cut short, but I know he had much more to say at the opening round. So we'll now give you opportunity again, Monsieur Arsenault.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Écoutez,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For a bit of context, one of my questions, Mr. Interim Auditor General, this is a public meeting, and I would like to provide some context. I would like to remind my colleague, Mr. Blenny, that when the Harper government was in place, you were asked to conduct budget cuts. You were asked to take on the burden in order to be able to meet the needs of a reduced budget under the previous government, which led you to make budget cuts, particularly to reduce mandated audits. You've said things that I understand entirely. Your next request, that your first request after that time period was an increase of 31%, and for all kinds of reasons, the Auditor General had not seen a lot of these coming. That's what I've understood, if I could summarize it that way. I would like to add a nuance. 15 seconds, please. Essentially, if not for all of the things that could not be predicted in 2011, everything was stable, with the exception of what we were expecting, that after 10 years we would have needed more funding. It's my understanding that this was not predictable, and now there's a new government in place, and in its first year of operation you asked for an increase of $9 million. Because the total increase was $21.5 million over 2 years. $9 million is what I understood in your introduction. Is that correct? Yes, the requested increase was 21, first increase 9, and the second would have started in the second year. In that 9 million that you received, 7 million. Yes, because in the 8.3 million that I think was granted in the budget votes, 7 million was granted in vote 1. Okay, so that's the context. I would like to come back what seems to me the most important issue. The issue of money is secondary. I think not that it's not important, but for me the most important thing is how can we set up an independent mechanism. I found out this morning, and please excuse my ignorance, I found out this morning from Mr. Leswick that your department is on the same footing as all other federal departments. And I'm wondering how this would work. You suggested a method. When it comes to the Auditor General, since 2005, there were recommendations made since 2005. Has the OAG sat down with the government to discuss these new mechanisms? Well, I'd like to start simply by mentioning that there was a time, I forget the exact years, where there was a mechanism in place. I believe it was a pilot project but the pilot project was not renewed. What year was that?
If that's okay.
Oui, ça va.
So there was an ad hoc committee of the House of Commons in the mid 2000s from 2005 to 2011, and it had an advisory role. The decisions on funding were still made by the Treasury Board and by the government. Although the agents of Parliament were comfortable with that mechanism, it wasn't made permanent after 2011. In terms of your question, there are a number of options available for an independent funding mechanism for agents of Parliament. There's examples in other jurisdictions, other Commonwealth jurisdictions like New Zealand, the UK, where committees of the House would have the mandate to determine what the budget of the agents of Parliament would be. Mr. Ferguson proposed a formula connected to overall government expenditures, but there's a number of ways that this could be done.
Est-ce qu'on a mené une étude de comparaison avec d'autres pays?
Did we conduct a comparative study with other countries similar to Canada to see what they do, to see if this independent mechanism exists elsewhere? Are we aware of elsewhere on the planet there's something like this that exists?
We have looked at other jurisdictions, largely
Example?
New Zealand, UK. We've looked at the provinces. We've looked at other governments, other examples like South Africa and Norway. You know, the Sweden, those kind of countries where the office is not exactly the same, but just looking to see if there's other good practices that we could.
OK, puis suivant ce comité ad hoc de qui c'est?
And after this ad hoc committee that went from 2005 to 2011?
Doing it to you again. I apologize. We're over our time here. Poor chair is getting caught up in your questioning. I'm getting caught up in your questioning. Mr. Christofferson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Boy, where do we go here? First of all, I just wanted to mention to Mr. Whalen, who used sort of a common sense approach, and I appreciate that in comments saying, hey, maybe politicians should decide what gets studied. And I appreciate where that's coming from, but I can assure you that one of the golden rules of public accounts is the independence of the Auditor General to choose what they go into. Otherwise, we're into a whole other nightmare scenario where they're being guided by politics. So that independence is crucial, and I think that's what the chair was emphasizing. But I understand where you're coming from. I just need to make that point, that that's a golden rule with us that we can recommend, and when it's unanimous, they pay serious attention. But at the end of the day, the law says it's independent. They decide where to go, not us. I had, I think, actually criticized the media, which is really stupid if you're running again, and I'm not. But when I am trying to get something, it's just as stupid, and I don't want to do that. I'm imploring is more the tone I should have taken, imploring the national media to please help us, pay attention to this. We need the public to focus on Parliament's plight here. And I want to give a shout out. I had mentioned Andrew Coyne, who was good enough to tweet it, but Marie Daniel Smith was the one at Post Media who did a story immediately after and then did a follow-up one. I could have lived without the hook that created the story, but it got the story out there. That's what matters, and it's much appreciated. And I can tell you that within the auditing and accountability and oversight and transparency of government community, it was noted and appreciated. So hopefully we can get others who will understand the importance of this.
Christofferson, I hate to interrupt you because I know you're getting into the crux of your question. The bells are now starting to ring. We are close to where the chamber is. Do we have unanimous consent to carry on for maybe 20 minutes? That would give us 15, 20 minutes. That would give us 10 minutes to get up and a few more questions. Looks like we're good. All right. Okay, continue, please. That wasn't taken off your time.
I appreciate that, Chair, very much. I now want to move to, again, I was talking about justification. The only justification we're getting in the House of Commons is the government ministers standing up and going back to 2011 and condemning the Conservatives and using that as justification for what they did. Number one, even if it was true, it's not justification to underfund the Auditor General. Secondly, it's not true. For a number, we've got it in writing. We've heard it from our Auditor General. It was voluntary. I can tell you, it was my friend Tony Clement, who was the president of the Treasury Board, and I know that he was actively working the phones and talking to the Auditor General's office because he knew that if they said no, that they had a bit of a problem, and he was showing the respect and doing what he could to avoid that. That is not what the government is saying the previous government did. And I don't belong to either party, and I was here for both parliaments. And it is absolutely unfair and unjustifiable that the government would make up stories about the previous government to create a phony fig leaf to hide behind. Next. I want to just point out again that while we have a majority government, we often lose track of the fact that Parliament is supreme, not the government. Parliament decides who is the government. Parliament decides who's the Prime Minister by majority vote. Whoever can get 50% plus one in the House of Commons is the Prime Minister. But at the end of the day, the purse strings, the Executive Council, the Cabinet, has no legal right to spend one penny that Parliament hasn't approved. Parliament controls the purse strings. But because we have a majority government and the government wins every vote and they put their budget forward and it carries, it looks like the finance minister is calling the shots. At the end of the day, though, structurally, and you really see this when you're in minority government, and you and I have been there, Chair, then you really see this play out. But the reality is, here we are going cap in hand to a subordinate body to ask them to match the funding that we recommend, and we control the purse strings. That's the absurdity of where we are. And I also want to point out, because it just jumped in my head, because I thought it was a good point. When we asked the question, are there any other jurisdictions? Was it Mr. Arsenault, I think, asked a really good question, said, are there other jurisdictions that do that? 9 times out of 10, Mr. Arsenault, when other jurisdictions around the world ask that question of their Auditor General, guess who gets held up as one of the 1 or 2 best in the world? The answer you heard was New Zealand and UK, because when you remove us from the equation, we like to fight with UK, whether we're 1 or 2. Lovely fight to have. But I just wanted to point out to you that that's the respect that we have in the world, and that's what's at stake too. And internationally, this government had a mandate to reposition Canada on the international stage. And here you are damaging our reputation in an area that we already are seen as world leaders. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Last thing I just want to say. 2. One is, with the greatest of respect, if the government would change their mind and acknowledge and say, you know what, we said we were going to respect the agents of Parliament. We said we were going to respect the standing committees of Parliament. Well, now the officer of Parliament, the agent of Parliament, and a standing committee by unanimous vote have called for this $10.8 million to be put back in. So as much as it was question period yesterday and I was full of rhetoric and everything else, but I do beg the question, where's the respect? Where is the respect? And the absolute last point I want to make, and then I will be completely finished on this subject. Am I going to get there, Chair? I don't have it right in front of me, so it can't be that important. All right, thanks.
All right, Mr. Arsenault, we'll come back to you, and then Mr. Blaney.
How many minutes?
I'm going to 4 to 5.
OK. Je reviens, oui.
Yes. I was talking about the comparison with other jurisdictions had to do with the mechanism, not Canada's reputation, obviously, in order to make sure that everybody correctly understood my question. Now, these mechanisms that we don't have, you were telling Mr. Hayes that was one in New Zealand, I think? Do you have an idea of what that could look like compared to others? Or what would the Canadian model be for an independent mechanism? Because I think that independence is really the issue when it comes to the requests from the Auditor General's office.
Positive and negatives to virtually every kind of mechanism that we put in, that we explore. It's a policy decision at the end of the day for Parliament, but we are looking at a number of options to propose. So the New Zealand model, which can be compared to the UK model and some of the other provinces in Canada, have a role for the parliamentary committee where the expenses that the officers of Parliament would like to have are considered. There's a model where we already have it in Parliament, where the parliamentary budget officer or the conflict of interest and ethics commissioner have an independent funding mechanism that is well known by parliamentarians, and it could work for us. There's the model that Mr. Ferguson proposed, where you link the funding of the agents of Parliament to metrics that relate to the work that they do, the mandated functions. So for the Auditor General, it might be the overall government program expenditures that the Auditor General suggested. For another agent of Parliament, it might be connected to the complaints or the workload that they have. But at I guess the crux of this is we would like, and we appreciate the support of the committee in this regard, we would like a model that doesn't require us to seek the funding through the departments that we have to audit.
J'entends bien. C'est que j'apprenais ce matin que le bureau du...
I found out this morning that the Auditor General's office was regulated by the same financial framework as other federal departments. I didn't think that was the case. I really thought that there was something else. And that's from the beginning, since Canada was founded. The solution that you're proposing, does this go out of the general framework of all federal government organizations?
I wouldn't say that we need to be taken out of the overall management of our office by government policies. Quite frankly, the government does a great job putting in place policies that are important and that help control the way that organizations operate. So we are not looking to have that happen, if that answers your question.
En deux mots, il me reste un peu de temps. En deux mots,
I've got a little time left, but very briefly, after the ad hoc committee that Mr. Ricard had mentioned, I'm not sure who can answer, but this ad hoc committee that concluded in 2011, what were the conclusions about that mechanism?
All that I know is that there was a report at that time.
You were not there?
Well, I was there, but
Okay.
all that I know is there was a report at that time, but the committee wasn't made permanent. I can't give you much more than that.
The committee was? Sorry.
Was not made a permanent committee.
Est-ce qu'il était public, ce
I
comité?
think so.
Was that committee public?
S'il vous plaît, j'aimerais vous faire parvenir ça. Monsieur Leswick, est-ce qu'il y a...
Mr. Leswick?
And I'll give you your time. There was an independent panel. Is the panel the same as the committee you're talking about? All right, carry on. This is Mr. Arsenault's time. Mr. Hayes, I think you were still answering, were you?
No, we're just
Mr. Arsenault was coming back with a question.
We're just making a note to follow up with the committee
Yes.
in terms of was the report public after that pilot project. So we'll find out and we'll let the committee know.
Mr. Arsenault?
Monsieur Leswick, est-ce qu'il y a tout de suite à la...
Mr. Leswick, for your office, are there talks or plans that could look like an independent mechanism for the requests of the Office of the Auditor General?
Mind all the options very well. I think it's a very contemporary conversation. The officers have co-addressed letters to the clerk of the Privy Council and others in the bureaucracy to advocate for their position. So I think the options are pretty clear. To answer the ad hoc panel, I think fundamentally when it ultimately expired, it wasn't renewed. I think there was some question whether it achieved this appropriate separation away from the executive, because as Mr. Hayes suggested, the panel was still recommending an amount to the president of the Treasury Board and the Minister of Finance. Like that was its machinery, which never really fulfilled, I think, what is the crux of the issue, which is this pure separation between parliamentary authority and will versus the hands of the executive members of government.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Arsenault. Mr. Blaney, did you want very
long
quick?
do I have,
A
before-
couple minutes.
OK, oui, ben je vais...
It'll be the final question. I'll have a few comments.
OK. Ben écoutez, moi aussi, j'ai un gros commentaire.
Well, listen, I've got a real comment to make. And I just want to support what was said by an eminent parliamentarian on the importance of separation of power and the credibility of officers of Parliament. My question has to do with the last comment that was made. Listen, this government was elected by promising transparency and that Canada was back internationally, and we're seeing interference in naval construction and procurement. getting rid of Vice Admiral Norman. We see the Minister of Justice who's resigning because I'm being told what to do. I'm seeing interference in the legal system when it's the executive power getting involved. We've never seen a situation like this in Canada's history. And when it comes to transparency, we've got a problem. What we're seeing is that the agency with the best international reputation, the Auditor General, well, the Liberals are attacking the reputation of the Auditor General by wanting to reduce their budget and orient what the work they're going to do. I want to know, how can we make sure your independence is assured? And what is the way going forward that you propose to ensure the independence of the Auditor General? Thank you. Just to clarify, there was no budget reduction. There might not have been the requested increase, but there were no cuts.
As possible,
Oui,
Mr. Blaney.
c'est vrai. Madame
So-
Mendez, je dirais que c'est pas un point d'ordre, mais c'est un point.
Madame Mendez, that's not a point of order, it's a point of debate, but I recognize that you're right. But as soon as we have extremely important issues on the table, we see the interference of the government with the auditors. So my question is how to restore and preserve the independence of officers of Parliament.
Je vais
Very briefly, I would like to summarize what Mr. Hayes presented in terms of a possible mechanism. Essentially, our funding must not be negotiated between us and the entities that we audit.
Thank you all.
Très bonne réponse.
I do have one other question and a couple comments. Mr. Leswick, thank you for being here today. You've been in that department for many years, I guess, and you know, I recall when I was minister in that department, you were there, and we appreciate you being here today. I, as you and most people, understand the budget consultation process and the budget. Thank you in your comments for bringing us around to how this works. Thank you for explaining to us that the Auditor General's office supplied a business case that and they did in 2011, a business case as to exactly how this money would be spent. As you know, in 2011 we were in a global recession, and all departments were asked to take a look at their spending and their budgets, and there was a deficit reduction action plan that was there in place. We found out today in Mr. Arsenault's question that the department or the Auditor General's office is included as one of those departments. I was not fully aware of that. I thought there was something different there with the Auditor General's office. Perhaps that's one area. The reason I say that is because I know that as they make their budget requests, there's also the back and forth. And at that time, Minister Flaherty, back and forth with the Auditor General as to whether or not you can indeed continue on with these audits. The assurance that they could was there. We have the letter. We knew that at that time that Mr. Ferguson and the Auditor General's office said that we want to be team players. All other departments are doing this. We can do this without cutting audits. Also, Mr. Christofferson brought up today the fact that the Treasury Board President, Mr. Clement, wrote a letter to the Auditor General saying, before this goes through, I want to know, is there going to be a reduction in plan? And so he was given the assurance there wasn't. To Mr. Ricard, did you receive that type of a letter from the Treasury Board President in the last budget?
obviously was a former Auditor General at the time, but I'm pretty sure that my answer is accurate. No, we have not been engaged in terms of confirming we would be okay without the funding. In fact, we kind of provided the contrary assurance to the business case. At the end of it, the Auditor General of the time was clear. Without this funding, we cannot do our job the way we're doing it now. Number of the audit will go from 24 to 14. That was written in the business case in terms of assurance or clarity of where we end up without the 21 million at the time.
All right. Just on a point of order.
Yes. Oui, Monsieur le Président, je m'excuse.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for interrupting, but on Ms. Mendez's point of order, you said, Mr. Chair, that we were working in a nonpartisan way. We have the Auditor General who just told us that we were preventing him from doing his work. I find it unacceptable for the Liberal Party. Mr. Chair, it's important for us to fight to preserve the independence of our institutions.
Thank you, Mr. Blaney. I just want to come back to this, and in my closing comments, that's almost like a challenge of the chair when you have a point of order to the. So we have to go.
We have 6 minutes.
So in a way, thank you for being here today. So much appreciated. I guess, Mr. Leswick, very quickly, the fact that our Auditor General was very ill, did that play into this? That back and forth wasn't as strong, perhaps, at the time. We didn't have an interim at the time. Could that have been part of this?
I can only speak at a bureaucratic level, Mr. Chair, but no, I don't believe.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. We want answers, and we want to see that Parliament continues to have the good work from our Auditor General and all parliamentary officers. Thank you, committee. We're adjourned.